Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. Time for yet another show. Let's roll it out. I know. Thank goodness. Thank Flying Spaghetti Monster. Thank anybody you want to. Thank Greg when he gets here that he's been collecting all of the latest stories for our morning roundup, because my usual news sources I told you in the morning post today, if you bothered to take a look, is that, usually my news source, it's not a news source per se, but a news monitoring method, my methodology of skimming for the headlines that people are talking about is to take a glance in at Twitter. But Twitter has been rendered useless to me for the past 24 hours or so because, as I said, I tweeted something that somebody liked, and I don't know what happened. And it's one of those ones that gets retweeted and liked over and over again, and it's nice to have that stuff passed around. But then you can't really read any replies or anything. And though you can certainly monitor what's incoming, the screen is changing every 2 seconds, and it becomes a real distraction. So, hey, I don't know what the hell's going on. But luckily we have Greg for that, and I got a couple of seconds here. I can glance around and see what's going on. I did see, as I was... and this is a new thing for me, whatever reason, Twitter on my iPhone is making me log in afresh every morning, or nearly every morning. I don't know if that was anybody's idea of an update or an upgrade to the system, but kind of sucks, so get rid of that. Although I'm sure it's more secure. But hey, who wants to do that first thing in the morning? So I noticed for a few seconds before everything kicked in and it started flickering across the screen again, all my... viral retweets and whatnot. Let's see. New round of subpoenas issued by the January 6th committee, hopefully in response to what I was tweeting about that everyone was sharing the news about, just posing the question, hey, I don't, I'm just asking questions here. I don't understand how nobody has been arrested for forging electoral college certificates yet. We spent a lot of time on that yesterday and just asked the question on Twitter yesterday, and I guess it's on everybody's mind. I really don't know. I mean, we can go through the mechanics of it, and we hinted at it a little bit, saying, okay, well, who issues the arrest warrant for that? Is it a federal crime, state crime, both? In Arizona, which started the conversation afresh, I guess there's a situation there, a right-wing lunatic attorney general, and though the Secretary of State, or maybe former Secretary of State at the time, was a Democrat and called out the crime, there's not much that the Secretary of State is by herself empowered to do. You need the rest of law enforcement to kick in, and they're just not doing it. So maybe people can pressure them to get around to doing that. They did leave their name and address on the document. It shouldn't be hard to follow up. So, one might wonder whether they'll get around to that today. Okay, other than that, well, I don't know. The big news today is I will be doing the show drunk off my ass, I suppose, because, not really. Today's tea selection, one of the teas gifted to me, not this time by Scott, but by the other production staff here at KITM World Headquarters, who gave me something. What is this exactly? I should have brought the box over. It's a tea... I don't know. I was going to say it's one of those things that they age in whiskey barrels, but you can't really age just dry tea in whiskey. How do they do this? Well, anyway, they've added the flavor, I suppose, of whiskey. Well, Scotch whiskey, at any rate. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, it's a really light flavoring of it, thank goodness, because I don't particularly love Scotch, although I like rye whiskey quite a bit. They didn't have that version. But the Scotch, and it comes out really nice. And like I said, Scotch, that peat can be overpowering, but interesting to have in the tea. It's too bad it doesn't have the same effect. But we can pretend it does and slur our way through the 2 hours and have a good time doing it. All right, well, let's see. Other things worthy of bringing up in our own morning roundup? Nothing. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what Greg has to offer us. Where's Pocket? I can't find it because I'm so drunk. Okay. Well, I'll just throw you this one. This was an interesting little curveball. One other COVID denier, prominent Republican lunatic COVID denier, dead. There's one each day. There's probably several. This one, interesting case to be sure. And if you read the sort of anodyne local report of it, just, well, she was a Republican activist, and sure, she was against vaccines and very vocal about these things, and then, golly, she contracted the virus, etc. Anyway, ends up, she's dead, but if you really want to get down into it, over at Daily Kos himself doing another of the installments of his top selections from the Sorry Anti-Vaxxer and Herman Cain Awards places, where they keep track of the most ironic COVID deaths. And as it turns out, prominent Republican activist Kelly Cannon is the latest victim to which everyone is pointing. And the headline, I'll tell you a little bit about what there is to discover if you decide to wander through the story. If they handed out awards for smug, self-destructive stupidity, this one would be a finalist, says Marcos, and I think he kind of nails it. And the story is heavily sprinkled with screen caps of her social media presence before she died, and it's everything you would expect, and all the denialism, but right up until the end, she's continues with this nonsense and is in denial of what's happening to her at the moment. Although one that was really interesting in here is she takes a moment back in September of last year to poke fun at Vice President Kamala Harris, who tweets, "This Delta variant is no joke. We need to roll up our sleeves, get the vaccine, etc." And, of course, her response to it is, "Kindly F all the effing way off. You're the joke." Well, in the end, it's the Delta variant, or maybe Omicron, I don't know. But probably Delta, given the timing of the thing, that ends up killing her. And the last week or two of her life is spent going over ground that we've all been over before, that there's this period during which you appear to be recovering from the virus after only 3 or 4 days, and the fever breaks, and it's only temporary, and then it comes roaring back, just like Abby right now. And it comes roaring back and finishes the job despite the disbelief. And it's really, at that point, it's just, that's the part, that, I guess, if there's any part that you really have feelings of empathy, it's that one, especially when you know the outcome of these people just saying, no, my ivermectin will save me, my faith will save me, my hydroxychloroquine, and these days, of course, drinking my own urine will save me. We didn't get to that level, but I guess I'm waiting for that one. Well, the first one I hear about who died with a jar of their own urine by their bedside, I guess. Well, I don't know. Call it a milestone. Anyway, get the effing vaccine instead. And if the only motivation is that you don't want to be laughed at by everybody else, by all the mean people who will laugh at you when you get tremendously sick or worse, die, then there's only one way to deal with it. Get the vaccine and it's all over. If you want to, get the vaccine and lie to people. I don't think it's a great idea, and you're driving other people to their own doom. But whatever, I don't know, get the vaccine and shut up about it. How about that? That's a terrific solution. In fact, that's my favorite one. All right, Greg Dworkin is here. Abby is here. It's okay if Abby's here. I don't know if you want to do a debate segment or anything, Greg, but it's up to you. Good morning.
She's here. She was thinking of taping something for
it's
you,
cold
but, hasn't really gotten her shit together.
And
speaking of which, in terms of getting shit together, it turns out that the wastewater monitoring for mRNA in Boston is really encouraging because it's dropping.
All right. That's the problem. All the droppings are clearing up. That's good.
Right. Now, they do it in Boston. They don't do it in New York because Bill de Blasio never got his shit together, so he couldn't do it.
I'm not getting in there.
It's good because it's a really good way of monitoring what's going on in your community, and I wish more communities would do it. And it turns out not only is that dropping in Boston, but the peak, according to the New York City Department of Health, has been reached in New York City, so that's starting to drop. It's also true in Seattle, and probably true in San Francisco. So the hot spots
hope so
went up fast, and they're starting to go down fast. The problem, of course, is that we have 50 pandemics, not one, just like we have 50 elections, not one. And so in the individual states, you'll find the smug people who are saying, ha, the blue parts are ready again, like always. Unfortunately, it's their turn. And this stuff spreads like wildfire. And, it's going to be bad before it's good. So the hospitals are still under stress. The red parts of the country will tell themselves it's not really a problem because all these people are dying with COVID instead of from COVID.
Right.
And they're filling up. The hospitals are filling up, but everybody knows it's with COVID, not from COVID, at least half of them. So what difference does it make? Of course, it's not real. The hospital isn't full, and they had to divert my ambulance to another state because I had a heart attack and there was no room, but it's all good because it was with COVID and not from COVID that they had to divert me, so who cares?
Are you getting treatment? If you're not, then what's the difference whether it was with or from? And wouldn't it be better if it was without?
Yeah, it's shall we say, an inauthentic discussion.
Yes.
It's interesting, fine. Go ahead and track it. Just like you should track different age groups. It's all interesting depending upon what point you're trying to make. But if you're looking at the overall big picture and using it to try to make the case that it's all just a cold, no.
No, that won't help you. And, of course, you can be hospitalized with a cold as well. I mean,
right. And I don't know if you heard this, but
what's the difference?
Tony Fauci was having none of it, not just from Rand Paul,
yes.
Which everybody heard about, when he told Rand Paul, look, you're fundraising off of this horrible situation where people are dying in the United States, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Have you no shame, sir? But he had a hot mic with Roger Marshall. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, yes. I did see mention of the hot mic moment.
Marshall said something inane, and Fauci disputed him, and the mic was still on, and he said, what a moron, Jesus Christ. And so, he was right.
Very humanizing.
What he told Marshall on mic and what he told Marshall on the hot mic.
Yeah, right. I think Barb had that comment. That's true on any mic, hot or not.
So a scientist who tracks this sort of thing, whose name is last name is Rosalie.
Oh, make up something fantastic.
I'm just trying to find
Bartholomew K. Rosalie.
Yeah, here it is. Rosalie, interdisciplinary scholar at Johns Hopkins, Public Health, National Security, and Information about Epidemiology, and a COVID-19 tracking alum. If you remember that site that used to do it until they said, okay, CDC's doing it, we don't have to. And it turns out, no, you have to.
Wasn't doing it.
She also runs a newsletter called Hoax Lines Newsletter on Disinformation and Media Manipulation.
Thanks, E.
And that's one of the reasons why I thought this particular tweet storm was kind of interesting. She says there's another Fauci hashtag, and since there is, let's talk about inauthentic activity boosting disinformation about Fauci for nearly 2 years. One indication of inauthentic activity is examining data taken initially and comparing it later. And she picks, of all people, Jack Posobiec.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're not going to get a good result from that guy. Okay.
Well, you get a very interesting result from that guy.
Yes, but bad. Yeah.
Okay. If a tweet receives a large share of engagement from inauthentic accounts,
I see.
You can tell. Because in March 15, 2020, Posobiec tweets, huge thank you to Dr. Fauci, doing an incredible job under tremendous pressure. People like him make America great.
Oh, what?
Okay.
All right.
And that's what he said in March of 2020. And at that time, in March of 2020,
they didn't know the dispute.
It had 693 retweets and 3,271 likes.
All right.
If you look at the same tweet now, it's got 398 retweets and 2,377 likes. About a third of them are gone. What happened to them?
What? Yeah, that's
They were
interesting.
fake accounts. They got banned.
Huh. Well, that's interesting, and it's interesting that the fake accounts would have wasted their time on that. I guess they didn't know what their marching orders were yet in
Right,
March.
exactly. So they just do it, and then it turns out after they get banned, their previous likes and retweets disappear. So by tracking that, you get an idea of how much of your traffic is actually coming from bots and trolls.
Yeah, now this I would do much sooner than getting down in the sewers with the poop.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
So,
there's lots of things you can track, and this is a cleaner one.
Right, from 2009 to 2019, there were 9,381 tweets containing Fauci, 6,787 retweets, et cetera, et cetera. They were talking about Fauci from accounts like NEJM, New England Journal of Medicine, the Obama White House, National Security Council, no partisan pundits, none. Probably didn't include a tweet that I had about Fauci during that time because I would occasionally talk about him. From 2020 to 2021, Fauci became a lightning rod.
Yes.
He'd seen prior presidents through crises, regardless of partisan leanings. This time it was different. Accounts in February began downplaying the pandemic, often mixing the claims with conservative and QAnon hashtags. Like, hashtag QAnon, to be not to put a fine point on it. Hashtag TCOT, hashtag MAGA.
Yeah, I remember them. I forgot about TCOT. Yeah.
Right? And I forgot what TCOT stands for, but it's something conservative.
Yeah. I think it was like Top Conservatives on Twitter or something.
Something like that.
Very weird.
And then bot and troll accounts like Praying Medic.
Okay.
Right? And although we knew very early on that the virus likely arose naturally and it had been spreading for too long to contain it, we still saw false claims spread about bioweapons and lag leaks.
Right.
And before the end of January, we'd see prominent individuals making extremely serious claims about the virus. The number one most retweeted account mentioning Fauci for 2021, a account called Cat Turd.
Oh, yes. Famous.
I'm still waiting for the WHO, CDC, Fauci, and media to explain to me how COVID cases have exploded worldwide since the vaccine was introduced. So
why?
That's very different, and those kinds of accounts are quite different than the New England Journal of Medicine accounts from the 10 years prior. So how we process information changes during a crisis, and the uncertainty affects us even in short amounts of time. And a series of studies examine the effect uncertainty had on the human mind, basically breeding paranoia. What are we to make of the chaos? So many things aligned at the wrong time in the worst way. Was it fate? Maybe not. Early research into communication, the pandemic, and members of Congress give both hope and despair at the same time. Okay, one study said at the outset of the pandemic, COVID-19 was not a political issue. It was not a foregone conclusion it would become one. There was a moment when a unified bipartisan or non-partisan consensus could have emerged. However, you have to remember, I will add, Trump was president.
Yes, that wasn't going to last long.
Right.
President Basketball led us at the time.
The result would almost certainly have been a less fractured response. It would have been more effective. Perhaps it wasn't a foregone conclusion that this virus would differ from SARS, H1N5, I think she meant H5N1, Ebola, Zika, and so many other near misses. What made it worse? Recall Fauci's record for the decade before 2020 with fewer than 10,000 tweets about him. And compare it to now, where you have 6 million retweets.
Yes, there is a big difference. And
right. So, something professors of mine, she said, have taught me in different ways is that we serve the public, everyone. We don't serve only those who like us. We believe human dignity is innate and not earned. In October 1988, Ann Compton asked candidates Bush Sr. and Dukakis who should inspire the country, and Bush said, I think Dr. Fauci. You probably never heard of him. Working hard on AIDS. Now, for those who knew Fauci before the pandemic, I raise my hand, this turn is tragic. Don't get me wrong, we all have our flaws, but may we all conduct ourselves in a way that our critics speak of us like that. Like Greg Gonsalves, who is a AIDS researcher and critic and activist, and often at loggerheads with Fauci over AIDS. I've known Fauci for 30 years. I protested him, criticized him, but no one knows more about infectious disease in the U.S., has done more to protect Americans from pandemics past and present. The attacks on him are scurrilous, vile, and desperate. And that's why I think, Fauci was pissed off at Rand Paul and Roger Marshall, because basically threats are being made against him and his family, threats on his life.
Yes.
Because they're grifting. And he called Rand Paul out on it, and that's why it was so interesting when he did that at a congressional hearing.
Yeah.
And Paul was sputtering afterwards, but the fact is he's fundraising off of it.
He is. I mean, he pointed right to it. He thinks it's a big joke because it raises money for him and doesn't do anything to his, public profile. But meanwhile, the guy's got to have cops outside his door all the time to protect his family.
Right. And then she points out how the media distort all of this.
Oh.
So basically what you do is you platform a non-relevant expert who makes alarming and incoherent claims. Okay. Apocalyptic Wall Street Journal op-ed not based on a study written by fake expert, for example. The author has no relevant experience in the field of virology and does not explain data selection protocol or research processes that lead to the bombastic conclusion. Basically, what you do is you pick people who have the quality of a pundit of, let's say, Doug Shane, who thinks that Biden should step down, Hillary Clinton should run.
Oh, still? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I
got right on that.
Or Thomas Friedman, who thinks that Kamala Harris should step down.
In favor of
Liz Cheney.
Oh, yeah.
Fusion ticket.
Yeah. Totally.
The politics of that, by the way, to beat a dead horse, is that Wyoming. Liz Cheney represents never-Trumpers, so by putting her on the ticket, you gain those 6 votes while losing, black votes,
right?
And female votes,
maybe,
and Democratic votes.
Yes, but we do sweep the.
And so, on balance, probably a poor political decision. But then again, it's Thomas Friedman.
Yeah, but
so you have to wait 6 months before you see whether or not he realizes it.
What a thing, too. I mean, talk about whatever's on TV at the moment is my vice president.
Well, not just that. People like Doug Shane and Thomas Friedman, no matter how badly they've screwed up, still have jobs and platforms.
Yes, that I don't really understand. Money. I don't get
So
it.
in any case, there was the Wall Street Journal with that. And then Fox runs Stanford epidemiologist says Fauci credibility is entirely shot. The person quoted is not in the same field. And Fox leads with Stanford, not the irrelevant expertise. So that's how news outlets sort of fool you into thinking they know what they're talking about.
Right. He just lives in the town of Stanford. That's all.
Right. And I know it's not likely to stop now, she says and concludes, but Fauci will always be a decent man who hears his critics, owns mistakes, and tries to do the right thing. I can vouch for that. He'll always be the guy who hugged an Ebola survivor to show others they didn't need to fear her.
All right.
Right. It's Princess Diana hugging AIDS patients. It's that kind of thing. Princess Diana.
Yeah. Well, no, that.
Never. You said Diana instead of Diana. You're not qualified to talk Diana.
Right. Yeah. No more Royals talk for you.
No more Royals talk. So, all of that I think is quite relevant in terms of what's going on now. So the good news is it does seem to be peaking, and the bad news is not everywhere. Some people are just going to experience how it starts, but it should be over relatively in a short period of time.
Yeah, in the places where people care about it.
And even a flash flood can still cause a lot of damage, so it's not like it's benign. And so that's why this with versus for stuff is so ridiculous, especially because it's a right-wing talking point that's being used to push a point of view. It's not really used in a helpful manner.
It's been around a while. I never caught on until now for some reason.
Well, because some states are starting to officially separate them.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, I wonder whether that was somebody's idea of a helpful
transparency,
refinement, or whether that was somebody's.
That's what happens when you try to play by the rules and the other team is trying to knock the board off the table.
Yeah.
Right? Equal footing there.
Okay. Well,
Okay. Other things that are going on with the pandemic, which I think are of note, and listeners to this show will not be surprised by any of this. CDC weighs recommending better masks against Omicron variant.
That seems like...
Can you believe it?
That's a good
Agency
thing to
is
weigh.
likely to say that people who can consistently wear N95s or KN95 masks rather than cloth masks should do so.
And that's everybody, if you can get one. It's what is this? I mean, is there a category of people who are, allergic to N95 material?
Well, it doesn't always fit your face. Some people put them on and say they're hard to breathe through. You have to try different brands and different styles to find one that works for you.
Okay. Well, all right. It's not the worst hedge in the world. I'll move past that one.
Right. Exactly. We know the masks provide better filtration. And to that point, Carlos Del Rio, physician, executive associate dean for Emory, as a matter of fact, has a little post how switching to an N95 mask gives a 75 times boost in COVID protection, at least if you both wear it.
That's great. I mean, can't argue with that.
So why suggest an N95 or a KN94 or some of these equivalents? Because it's better. Oh, well, what about the fact that they're fake? Well, you can buy it from a reputable place like ProjectN95.org, which is a nonprofit, or you can use your iPhone to scan it and make sure it's authentic because they have a little tag on the inside front cover of the box, and it actually works.
Oh, I'll take a look at that. Yeah.
I'll send that to you, but it's a really useful thing if you get a box. How do I know it's real? Because you can authenticate it with your iPhone.
Okay. Dang, I wonder what that means about mine. Mine came in plastic bags. I don't know.
Well, there's a tag on it often. So, if you can't find the tag, then you don't know.
All right. Yeah, well, I better check.
Also,
anyway.
where if you bought it from that guy selling it in Times Square because it just fell off the truck, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, well, it wasn't in Times Square, but I don't know. They seem authentic. They smell bad, just like regular ones. So that's something. All right. Well, my shipment from Project N95 is actually due today. It's taken a while to get here.
If you got it from N95, then it's okay.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Screwed up the music a little bit on our way out, but it worked out okay. We're here. If you're here, then everything's fine too. Okay. So I'll check on my KN95 masks and go back to my local retailer who I think probably broke down a box of things that's probably marked, not for resale or something like that. But everything's individually, or they're packaged in packs of 10 in plastic, sealed plastic bags. I think maybe the big box that it got shipped in might have that tag. I could ask to see it. Seems like a reputable enough guy. I don't know. If you need any restaurant supplies, come on over. So, all right, let's see.
Other things to know, you could reuse your N95s, but not forever. You got about 40 hours worth out of it, and then you need to replace it. And the best way is to have several and rotate them, and let the one that you just used sit out for 3 days or so before you go back to it. So if you have 3, you can rotate them. That's probably good enough. If you're using them every day, you should probably have 4.
Yeah, well, maybe that should be the school regimen. We'll work that out. Okay.
We have little hooks. We put up little hooks, so, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that sort of thing.
I remember that from early on, or you had that, or paper bags at one point you were going with.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah, okay.
I've been a big mask advocate for a long time. So If you advocate against or denigrate mask mandates, says Julie Rafeman, who's a Boston University assistant professor who looks into these things, one of the most effective policies to reduce the spread of an airborne virus, a policy every G7 country except the U.S. has in place, please know,
should kick us out.
Low-income essential workers and the kids that this leaves behind are the most harmed. She has a little graph here. Percent of 18 to 64-year-old Americans not working last week due to being sick with COVID symptoms or caring for someone sick with COVID symptoms by vaccination status and 2019 income. Okay, if you make under $25,000, according to the Household Pulse Survey, 2 weeks ending 12/13/21, so slightly dated, but still, relatively current. So from a scale of 1 to 6.
1 to 6.
Okay.
All
well,
right.
If you were under 25,000 a year and you had 2 or more doses of your vaccine, the number of people who couldn't work is 1.5 out of 6. But if you didn't get vaccinated, the number is 5.5 out of 6.
Okay.
And that 5.5 out of 6 is the highest number of all the different groups under 25,000, 25 to 35, 35 to 50, 50 to 75, 75 to 100, or if you make over 100,000. If you make over 100,000 and you had your doses, 0.4% had 0.4 out of 6. 0.4 out of 6 missed your job because you couldn't work.
Yes. Well,
if you weren't vaccinated, that number is 1.4. So 5.5 if you're poor, 1.4 if you're rich, 1.5 if you're poor and you did get vaccinated, 0.4 if you're rich. And so what's the point of poor versus rich? Firstly, it points out who this really affects.
Yes.
Right? And so
a lot of diseases are that way.
It's really, really important to try to get your essential workers to get vaccinated. So those are the places that ought to be doing mandates and giving the vaccines right there in the place of work.
Yeah, okay, that's a good strategy.
Right? And at the same time, the fact that the rich don't suffer that much explains the attitude of pundits about, it's the big deal.
Yes. I think that's probably exactly right. Yeah.
They're not being affected,
home,
so what do they care?
Right.
The school should open because it's inconvenient for me.
Yes, the kids run around in my
But I'm the
office.
bus driver. Look at my numbers compared to your numbers.
That's exactly right. And I don't really know. I don't know why with all the spare time and leisure opportunities that your job benefits bring you, you should be thinking about empathizing with others.
Well, the other side of that coin is that facts don't care about your feelings.
Yeah.
And what that means is you can rail all you want about how schools should stay open.
I don't. But yes.
Because otherwise it's inconvenient for me and I don't know what to do with my kids. But the fact is they're going to close if the bus drivers aren't there. I mean, I think Maryland actually called out the National Guard to drive buses.
Cool.
I don't know if their training prepared them for that.
Don't shoot the kids.
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. Even with all of that.
Oh.
Even with the body armor, even with the guns, I don't know that they're properly trained to deal with that.
No, it's one of those "you're trapped in here with me" situations.
Yeah, didn't you ever see an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? I don't think that this, is. I don't think they're ready.
Right. Yes. Okay.
It's not that they're overtrained. I think they're undertrained.
It's not a
but that's another story.
Yeah. Okay.
The point is
right.
that you have to do this because the bus drivers can't come in. See, schools are closing in certain areas, not because Democrats want to close schools and thereby lose the election in Virginia.
Yeah, everyone likes to write that that's what's happening, but no.
Right. No, what's happening is that there aren't personnel and so schools have to close. So the idea of closing schools for 2 weeks when you have this really quick spike, because it is a quick spike, and then tack on 2 weeks at the end of the school year makes a whole lot more sense than having these ridiculous arguments about how Democrats want to close schools or this person wants to. Or it's got nothing to do with what you want. It's what you need.
Yeah, right. Well, keep that in mind. Oh, and by the way, if you're calling out the National Guard to drive the buses for the school kids, we should probably talk at some point about the necessity of getting your National Guard vaccinated. If you're going to drive my kid's school bus, I want the schools open, but I want unvaccinated bus drivers. Oh, no. You're going to need to give in on that. Sorry.
Right.
It's
So
happening
Bloomberg
everywhere.
has a bizarre story. That is to say, it's a great story with a bizarre headline.
Oh, all right.
Okay. Tom Inglesby
Bizarre.
is the new testing coordinator czar.
Okay.
I know Tom. He's an MD, longtime health preparedness expert, long time. I work with him, not closely. It's not like we were passing ships in the night. You know, he was a subject matter expert then, and I was a gadfly who happened to be at the same conference with him several times and spoke with him several times. Mm-hmm. That's how I know him. But he's an expert, very good at this.
Yes.
He's on leave from Johns Hopkins. He's at the White House. Inglesby tells Bloomberg the testing shortage will ease and that there won't be another production slowdown this summer, and that they're getting better and better. The supply of tests has increased substantially, about 300 million a month now from 15 September. They're requiring insurance to reimburse people, which is terrible. They should just give it to you free. They're setting up testing sites and will soon launch a program to send tests free to people across the U.S. The program's website will be detailed this week. They'll ship out 500 million tests. A key question is whether the ramp-up will last. Inglesby says it will. Testing shortages persist across the U.S. right now. All of that's fine. I called Zeke Emanuel, says the author Josh Wingrove, who advised Biden's transition and just called for a new testing strategy. Emanuel said he'd recently spoken with Inglesby and made suggestions. I was very impressed, but testing can't slow in the summer. That turned out to be a big mistake. And there'll be something of a rollout today of a briefing for Inglesby, whose predecessor took a role at HHS. Biden has a big COVID speech this Thursday. Okay. And so the headline of this whole piece describing all of this is Biden team to prod COVID test production even after demand fades. What they mean is that after the pandemic is over, they don't mean demand is fading now.
Yeah. We don't. Yeah, we
oh,
don't
now that demand is fading, now you're moderating your, now inflation is at 7% a year, but it was much lower in December than it was in October. And energy prices are actually incredibly low relative to where they were for the moment.
Yep. Okay.
Right. So, energy price, we're putting price controls on energy. Well, why? They're low.
Yeah. Well,
gas
that's
prices.
where we want to
Let's
control
look at gas. Yeah, people aren't talking about it. Gas prices are the reason Biden's unpopular. No, actually. It has a lot to do with it, but it's not like when gas prices change, you're going to report on it because you never do. You only report when they're high. You never report when they're low. And so, the steady stream of bad news that news media likes to do, because that's why people watch and that's where you get clicks. Nobody watches the news and nothing's happening. So, it is what it is. In fact, there's a new Morning Consult poll out, which was very interesting, I thought. Basically, Biden's at 44 plus and 53 minus. Approval 44, disapproval 53, and basically everything.
All right.
Which is not great, but not awful. It needs to be better by the midyear. All of the analysis of redistricting says it's basically a wash. So if Democrats lose, redistricting is not the reason. It's a reason. It's always a reason, but it's not the reason because it suddenly got worse. It's basically a wash. But they asked the question, if the election for U.S. Congress in your district was held today, Morning Consult political poll, which one of the following candidates are you most likely to vote for? Democratic candidate, Republican candidate, or no opinion? You want to take a guess as to what that poll says?
No opinion.
You have no opinion on the poll?
On guessing. I'm not sure whether I want to guess.
Well, as you know, the news has been, oh, my goodness, usually the Democrats run up a big lead, but now the Republicans are leading, and that's disaster.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the Democrats are 44, Republicans 41, and don't know no opinions 15.
Aha, no opinion.
What I'm saying is there's a lot of time between now and 2022. It's not a done deal that the Democrats have lost. Redistrict wasn't the final nail, as everybody said it would. Republicans leading the generic isn't permanent, as this poll shows.
Good.
And there's a lot going on. And if the Omicron is a fast spike, like it is in New York and Boston wastewater, then you really are not in a position to predict what happens in 2022 because it's all going to depend on how Biden handles the rest of the pandemic. Now, is he doing the right thing? Is he screwing up? We talked about all the ways he's screwing up on the last show.
Right.
And so there are issues without question. But, there's other things going on as well. For example, Patrick Chovanec, who's a conservative, very conservative guy, but a straightforward never-Trumper, says the rules of COVID are simple.
And
if asked, wear a mask. Out of generosity and courtesy, if nothing else. It's not a big deal.
I saw you retweet that. That's a good one.
Number 2,
nice.
Get vaccinated. The evidence indicates it helps. Number 3, keep schools open except as a last resort. The benefit outweighs the risk. And number 4, be willing to change your mind.
Yeah, all right.
That's all. Those are the rules.
Seems
it's not a big
reasonable.
deal.
I'm for that. These things seem reasonable, and it seems like a conservative value. Be nice to people around you. Be courteous. Okay, good. And, close schools only as a last resort. Certainly it would be a lot
while the
easier to
teachers
get
are
along
out,
with.
then maybe you need to close the schools.
Well, then that would be the last
change
resort.
Your mind in case stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, if no one can teach the kids or supervise them while they're there, but all the kids are healthy, they're 100% healthy, and kids can never get COVID. But if the teachers get it and have it and can't show up to work, your school's closed.
Right.
Sorry.
So the politics of it is that, okay, this is what it is right now, and that doesn't, past performance doesn't predict future results.
Yeah.
So we'll see. John Bresnan of, where is he now? I guess he's Punch Bowl.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Biden called the January 6th. Is he or is he a Politico? I can never tell my pundits without a scorecard
he is
here.
testing poop in the sewers in Boston.
Punch Bowl News. Yeah, he is
right.
Punch Bowl. Says Biden had a speech yesterday about voting rights, by the way.
Oh, yes.
We didn't cover that terribly because, what he says doesn't matter. It's what he does.
Okay.
And if you don't have the votes in Congress, then things
rough.
don't really move. And so there's your summary. But
people like
in that
the
process
speech.
of giving that speech,
Yes.
Bresnan thought the big news
With Zbigniew Brzezinski. Yes.
was Biden called the January 6th attack on the Capitol an attempted coup.
Well,
That's
good.
because it was.
Yeah, right. So
That's not big news.
I'm sure they're let's go Brandoning that to death, but it was right.
But the fact is, it was.
Yes.
And so that's
Trump
why,
Mustang
and I'm glad you covered
for
the fake certificates, which are from at least 7 states now.
Yeah.
I've covered some of them.
Let's
I don't
kind of
fully
arrest
understand what's going on there, how that happened, and why that's not a bigger deal.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it isn't a bigger deal. And so, there's a
True
lot of
also.
stuff that happens with that committee that we just don't know yet.
I mean, maybe I was looking around for the explanation. Why did it just explode again and everybody missed? I don't know why everybody
Because
missed
people
it the
just
first
got a
time.
hold of the actual
Yeah.
certificates.
Well,
I got
that's-
one from Georgia, from the Georgia press, saying, we just got a hold of this fake certificate. Look at the names on this. These are
Yeah.
local names. Let's
But
talk about it. It's a local issue.
They put it out. The people who did it published it early on, and there was so much going on. I understand why people missed it then, but when I was looking for an explanation for why it was catching on now, and one possible explanation for why it's catching on now is now they're actually, laying the groundwork to go do something about it. And if you just arrested people out of the blue, maybe that's not very interesting. But if you tell everybody, this very serious thing happened, and allow people to get all worked up about it, then you make some arrests, and everybody says, good, finally.
Yeah, well, there's 2 things that
leaks
come
start
to
happening
mind.
right
One is
before
that
the
they actually
action.
have the physical documents now.
Yeah, the news organizations, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
And how did they get them? And that leads me to the other, which is, committee leaks some other stuff if they want
Yeah,
people to know
I
that.
think maybe that's it. That must really be it.
They go together. They're not,
Mm-hmm.
either or.
Right. I talked briefly about it, actually, right off after we spoke on Monday, I think, just talking about, we were talking about how leaky the committee is. And then I was saying, it's not even really necessarily a leak situation. It's news organizations do this all the time. They want information, and they either don't think they're going to get it straightforwardly, or they ask for it and there's a little bit of pushback, and then they file an open records law request, whether that's on a federal level, or FOIA, or state open records, or whatever. And what ends up happening is the committee has the opportunity to dispute the request, or to block the request, or fight the request, and you just don't. And then it's not a leak per se, it's an open records request being answered. That's all. Just you happen to request exactly the things that I said we were going to leak to you, but if you actually just file this paper, no one gets in trouble. Okay. Awesome. So that's sort of an interesting official channel for leaking. Now we're ready to release this stuff. No one wants to be the official leaker. So we'll just tell news organizations, if you file an open records request, I'm sure you'll get what you want.
Yep. So Maddow Blog is putting out a lot of this. She had 5 states and then 7 states. And I came across in my Twitter feed some local Georgia folks putting out Georgia being one of them. Remember, Brad Raffensperger is one of the people resisting
sort of.
Trump's, find me 11,000 votes or whatever it was.
Yes.
And yet Georgia still had one of these fake certificates. So what's that about? And so I think, it piques the interest. And there's a lot more, I think, to find out about this. And that's, again, one of the things I think is going to be intriguing in terms of what the committee does.
Yes. And so maybe this is the end of the road for them. We should certainly stop treating it like it's some sort of, cheeky high school prank. It's the Electoral College.
Well, part of the thing is you're trying to put together a case for, what's going on with the whole run-up before January 6th to January 6th. It's not just January 6th that you're looking at. And where in this whole run-up is the connection between what Trump knew and what was going on and what happens next. So can you, for example, make a case that Trump had some idea that the violence would happen? Because, just the inciting people in and of itself might be horrible but legal.
Well, if you get to incitement.
In other words, First Amendment rights and this, that, and everything else.
Yes.
Unless you can actually prove that you deliberately incited somebody. I was just giving my opinion. It's not my fault that they reacted the way they did.
My opinion is you should beat that guy with a hammer. Right? Okay. Well, that's pretty specific, sir.
However, as Marcy Wheeler points out, if you have in your hands, and you'll have to explain the legal term because I don't understand it, mens rea.
The guilty mind, essentially, intent to do wrong.
So if you have these fake certificates in your hand, that's your evidence of corrupt intent when you asked people to corruptly block an official proceeding on January 6th. How do you know it was corrupt? Well, because you had these fake certificates you were trying to use instead of the real ones that were the basis for the January 6th vote. And that's where the fake certificates come in terms of being important.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in terms of their importance to a prosecution of Trump.
Yeah, I mean, how do you prove that the people high up had corrupt intent and they were deliberately working to obstruct the vote count?
Yes.
You knew that they were working to obstruct the vote count, but how do you know it was a corrupt intent?
Right.
Well, because you have this demonstrated mens rea, as Marcy Wheeler calls it. You now have in your hand fake certificates. Where did they come from? Did Trump know about them? Did he refer to them when he was giving his speech? Did he refer to them in tweets? I mean, there's stuff going around saying maybe he did. That's where all of this stuff starts to get interesting.
Okay. And that coincides with, let's see, I picked up a Newsweek article. Newsweek, not what it used to be, but I did find one that says Mark Meadows worked on creating the fake electoral college certificates. That's alleged, at least in their headline. And I did see somebody pointing out, I guess maybe they heard it on the Maddow show or whatever, tweeting about it and saying that some number of the states apparently, they can look in the metadata there and found that they had used the same word template to make it. So
I'm not saying this is a slam dunk case that therefore proves yada yada. I'm just saying they exist. We have them. We know their existence now. We didn't 2 days ago. They physically exist, and you can trace where they came from, apparently, if that Newsweek story is correct. And as Marcy Wheeler excellently does, because she's so good at connecting the dots, okay, the pressure on Pence at the same time as putting pressure on the Congress to, in effect, change their vote on January 6th from what it otherwise would have been. If they worked in conjunction, and if there was a demonstrated mens rea of corrupt intent, which you now have in your hand with those 7 documents, which is why they were doing it, and you can show, all ifs, and you can show that Trump knew about this beforehand.
Yes.
It's a different ballgame. And so that's why it's so interesting to see these and say, okay, what does that all mean?
Yes. Yeah, okay, I can understand that sort of overarching.
Right. In other words,
picture.
the way she puts it, the coordinated
Yeah.
effort to get Republicans to raise bad faith challenges to the vote is not illegal. But forging documents and saying,
Yes.
you are wrong and these are right, I'm not so sure that that's okay to do.
No, I would think that would be much more troublesome, and I would say we can work on it just a little bit more and massage the facts a little more. I'm not so certain that the effort to get them to change their votes is all on the up and up either, but that's something different. These documents, though...
Well, it's as a lay person who reads mystery novels, if you have the motive in your hand there, as well as the means,
knew what the motive was.
which was demonstrated by the crowd demonstrating, then that's a different story than saying, well, theoretically, he would have preferred to win.
Yes, that's true. And one key part here is the allegation that Mark Meadows worked on creating these things and that there was a common template. That's very helpful. The thing that stands in contrast to where Marcy usually is that her argument has been, well, the methodical way of pursuing this case is to start with the groundlings and sweep up the low-level people and roll them up and have them testify against the higher-ups, which may or may not have been what pointed to Mark Meadows' work on this thing. However, the people who actually forged these things and sent it, well, why weren't they rolled up then? I mean, you say, well, okay, we've had these things for a while. I knew, we discussed it on the program in December of 2020, that those things were being created and being sent to Congress. They put out press releases to say they were doing it, and the documents are signed and they had return addresses on them. That's not a hard bust to make. I know who did it and I know where they live. Arizona sent them a cease and desist letter for violating the copyright on the state seal. So where do you send the cease and desist letter? Why don't you have cops deliver that letter?
Well, again, the way Marcy puts it to a layperson like myself so I could understand it is this. To the extent that the Department of Justice and the Select Committee can substantiate that Trump knew the request was illegal,
yes,
then that's proof of kind of corrupt purpose.
Sure.
So if you knew that there were,
them.
If you knew that there were fake counterfeit documents for electors floating out there,
right.
If you knew about that beforehand, and you intended to use them,
yes,
that's it.
Yeah. For the case against Trump and those guys. My question is, so the person who signed and said they were an elector, why aren't we getting that person? Why isn't that person under arrest?
That's why the local pieces like the one about the Georgia electors and here are their names was so interesting, because that's just breaking now, so let's see what happens with it locally. After all, it's the Georgia Attorney General that's got the best case to sue Trump now in regard to putting pressure on Brad Raffensperger, because that's a state law that he broke.
Yeah, well, I hope we get around to that. But yeah, those certificates showed up in December of 2020 with names and addresses and at the National Archives. Why there's no federal case about that.
I wonder why they're trying to get information from the National Archives. I wonder why Trump's blocking that.
Yes. Well, by the way,
what sort of information
could
possibly be in the archives that's so interesting?
Yeah, well, they're actually after other things there, but certainly, archives is a good place.
Well, this is an example of the kind of things that might be in the archive that actually have some interest.
Yeah, I guess, although that would be an interesting question. I doubt
I'm not saying that it was about this, but if this is the kind of thing that's there, I would want more. It
would have been interesting to see to watch Trump try and assert executive privilege over counterfeit electoral college certificates.
I mean, what if
wouldn't
the
even
National
have that privilege
Archives
over the
has
real
these
ones.
certificates with a handwritten note in crayon from Trump or Sharpie, which is what he likes to use. These are important. Make sure you don't lose them. Donald Trump.
Well, I always thought the scheme was crazy for sending them, just because I was curious how you even hoped to get them into the hands of the vice president, if you thought that he would use that as a platform for overturning the elections. But the part, I guess, I don't know if I discussed it at the time or not, but maybe only just now. The other part of the scheme that's crazy is you're saying, I am doing a crime, and my name is this, and I live here. But, there being no consequences, maybe it's not that crazy. Right. So, all right. Well, maybe they get arrested now.
I'm sending you a copy of the Georgia tweet as well as the actual Georgia tweet in case you want to look at it later and follow up what all of that is supposed to be about.
I'm sending you a fake copy of the Georgia tweet.
Picture, Georgia Republicans' fake electoral slate they tried to send despite not actually winning the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
And a group called American Oversight, nonpartisan oversight watchdog that uses public records requests and litigation to uncover the facts and hold government accountable, they say. We obtained the fake electoral certificate submitted to Congress by Trump supporters in 7 states as part of the failed attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 election. See the files here. And then they give a picture of the certificate.
Okay, I'm glad that they did that, and I will have to search after the show. But I'm pretty sure that
maybe for tomorrow you can follow up with this about what all this means.
Yeah. Well, I will, and yes, and they should arrest all these people. But maybe that's something that it is possible that they finally did visit these guys, and that one of them said, "Yeah, Mark Meadows told me to do it," and that's how we found out what's in the Newsweek article. So, if so, I'd like to have that information. It'd be okay to tell me now. I'm open to hearing it. Give me a call. I don't know who. Archivist. Let me know.
Anyway, as I say, that's my layman's interpretation of it's interesting. This is why it's interesting.
Okay.
It's mostly interesting because it helps to show that corrupt intent was intended all along.
Yes, I like that part of it.
With your name on it.
Yeah, it was everybody's going to corrupt intent. They got a lot of conspirators there. By the way, if anybody agrees with me and would like to go arrest these people, and they do know where they live, call me and I will write you a arrest warrant, since you can do that now without getting in trouble. So
also write them an excuse note so they don't have to go to work today on the day they go and do their citizens arrest.
In fact, I'll write you a constitutional amendment that says you don't have to go to work. Why not? You can do it with anything. All right, Greg. Well, thank you. Don't write any electoral college certificates.
I'll try not to.
Okay.
By the way, you should mention the NPR interview that Trump had with Steve Inskeep, where Trump got upset and hung up.
Yeah, you want to do your imitation of of that interview? What are you doing all this illegal stuff for, Greg? And then you say, "Ba-doo." Right? Okay.
Yeah, "Ba-doo."
Very good.
I will see you on Monday. I won't be on the show tomorrow.
Right.
And we'll be back at some point, but you'll be here to entertain us and tell us what's really going on.
Okay. Well, I'll be here. Whether people are entertained is up to them. An individual choice. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Thank you for holding on long enough to make the hang-up noise. I wish that seriously, I don't mind that at all. I know that drives Greg up the wall somehow, but I think it's fun. And now I wish that Trump had been interviewed on NPR via Skype so that you could have heard that too. I did see that story this morning. Not a huge, blockbuster story or anything. Just Trump being Trump, I guess, and therefore nobody cares. But this is probably the least impactful Trump thing to happen in a long time. But apparently he agreed to do an interview with NPR, which, as I recall from reading the write-up, and I don't know, I didn't put aside, I don't think, because it was like, okay. So the story is, I guess they've been asking him for an interview for 6 years, and he has refused NPR all 6 years, from the time he was campaigning as a candidate all through his presidency and the first year post-presidency. And I don't know what motivated him to give up the ghost now, but he had an interview with him, but he did it by phone from Pervalago, which is, his MO now. I'm not leaving my house. You want to interview me? I'll call you on the telephone like I used to do with the call-in shows. And he had an interview, and, I guess he avoided NPR interviews all along because he thought that they would ask him real questions, and they did, and he hung up on him. That's the long and short of it. Thank you. Greg sends me the write-up because I didn't. And the news is, pressed on his election lies, former President Trump cuts NPR interview short. Let's see, who's writing this up here? Is this what passes for byline on the NPR site? Domenico Montanaro. Steve Inskeep, whose name you would know, I guess, from NPR. I don't know. Are the other guys on-air personalities? I think Steve Inskeep is. And Miles Parks, but I don't listen to NPR enough to know. So, and it's no insult. I don't listen to any radio long enough to know. Why? Because I don't go anywhere. I'm not in a car for any length of time. Do I have a radio in my house? Sure. But I also have people here and television when I need distraction. Anyway, let's see. Greg sent me a explanatory note here. Pressed, let's see. In the NPR piece, Inskeep explains all things on the background for the Trump piece. Yes, right, okay. And then, of course, you can listen to the interview itself. And the deal is he asks Trump, hey, what's up with your election lies, essentially. They play a clip. Senator Mike Rounds, I guess. We'll just read you the story right here. Some Republicans leaders are trying to move on from former President Donald Trump's failed attempt to overturn the 2020 election that he lost. I know that's hard to believe, but by way of proof, he offers this quote from Mike Rounds, who, again, is a United States Senator. Like, for real. I know you never heard of him. He's from South Dakota and whatever. And he says, while there were some irregularities, there were none of the irregularities which would have risen to the point where they would have changed the vote outcome in a single state. And maybe that is why you've never heard of Mike Rounds. You never read a quotable quote from the guy because, I don't know, the one thing I've ever read from him is a little bit garbled. Anyway, so I'm being totally unfair to him, but I bet I got him pegged nonetheless. Anyway, so he said this on ABC's This Week, which I guess would happen on a Sunday because that's when those things happen. The election was fair as we have seen. We simply did not win the election as Republicans for the presidency. And if we simply look back and tell our people don't vote because there's cheating going on, then we're going to put ourselves in a huge disadvantage. So, all right, on his feet, not terrific. I don't know if he's any better when he can gather his wits about him or whether there's any wits to gather or anything, but not an impressive showing there for Mike Rounds. I mean, he's not wrong. It's just whatever. There's also here a note from Greg that says, McConnell defends Rounds, Romney defends. I mean, Rounds is correct. He's just a mushmouth. So, anyway. Nothing wrong with that. I do think here, I also think he may have sort of gotten the wrong impression about what they were trying to do with their Trump making the accusations of vote rigging or whatever. Rounds is one of those guys who says, and he spits it out at the end of his quote. Well, if we start saying that the vote is rigged and then Republicans won't vote. They'll just say, oh, it's all rigged anyway, so what's the point in going to vote? And I know that's a concern that they've expressed a lot of fear about. Although they've also, by the way, I should say they've offered it up. Some of them have offered it up as defense. That, and there's the real answer. Greg just chimes in with it. I had paused before I get to this too, but they think it's. I think there's a branch of people who say this, who think it's a defense for the Republican Party at large and possibly Trump in passing. That it's a bad thing to say and everything, but it's not voter suppression, or it's not something we're doing consciously because it will depress the Republican vote, and we don't want that. So clearly, it can't be a coordinated Republican strategy to agree with Trump when he says this and to say that the vote is rigged and that there's shenanigans going on, because that would just suppress our vote, and we would never want that. Except the problem is, for one thing, Trump, and he might even be right here, Trump believes that complaining about vote rigging increases Republican base turnout, that the reaction to it is, and I think I actually agree with him. I don't think that there are a whole lot of Republicans who say, well, the whole thing is rigged, so we should just abandon the field and just let I assume they believe it, the Democrats steal the whole thing unmolested. Why? make it difficult for them by turning out in great numbers visibly and casting votes. I think Trump thinks, and I think he's right, and I think a lot of his base think, no, because it's so rigged, we need to turn out in such huge numbers that it becomes impossible to rig, or that we can, protest and threaten people with guns and say, we'll catch you rigging it. Now, they could turn out in huge numbers and still be outnumbered, and that is what is happening in most cases, but that doesn't matter. They want to yell and scream and bring guns to things and say that things are being rigged anyway. But yeah, I don't think that Rounds I just don't think he expresses his point very well, for one thing. I think he might even be one of the people who's into it for cover to say, well, we don't want him to say that the vote is rigged because we think it suppresses Republican turnout. I don't think it does, but I think that they think it works as a defense for them, a way to distance themselves from Trump, which might make it might make it easier to defend themselves from Trump's attacks. Why aren't you agreeing with me? Well, it's not that I don't agree with you, sir. It's that I am worried about Republican turnout, and I'm just trying to, help keep Republican turnout high, and that's good for you. I'm supporting you. That may or may not be enough to confuse Trump into thinking they're still on his side. Anyway, some of this point is made obliquely, as I recall, in the NPR article, right? So Rounds says, in his garbled way, well, there were irregularities, but it wasn't enough to change the vote outcome in any state. But he says it in a sort of way. And then he says, we didn't win the election. And if we tell people don't vote because there's cheating going on, then we put ourselves at a huge disadvantage. But Trump, who has endorsed dozens of candidates for the 2022 midterm elections and still holds by far the widest influence within the GOP, is trying hard not to let them move on. No, I think it's an advantage, because otherwise they're going to do it again in 22 and 24, and Rounds is wrong on that. Totally wrong. And he might be right about that part, I suppose. Although, when you say he's totally wrong, he also means the part about the irregularities not rising to the point where it changes the vote outcome in a single state. Trump obviously also believes, or at least wants you to believe, that it did in fact change the outcome. I mean, that's a huge difference, right? If you endorse sending counterfeit electoral college certificates from states, presumably it's because you believe or insist that other people believe that the vote outcome was in fact changed, and that this certificate will help you prove it, even though it's counterfeit. Anyway, so he continues to fight with people like Rounds. The interview, as they say here, was 6 years in the making. Trump and his team have repeatedly declined interviews with NPR until Tuesday, when he called in from his home in Pervalago, Florida. It was scheduled for 15 minutes, but lasted just over 9. This is the part that brought me around to it. After being pressed about his repeated lies about the 2020 presidential election, Trump abruptly ended the interview. That is to say, how do you end an interview that's happening over a telephone? You hang up. That's how. You don't say, well, I'll stay on the line for the additional 6 minutes, but I refuse to answer any further questions. He's not going to waste his time with that. Let's see. There were also, of course, Trump mixed messages on getting vaccinated, in case you're interested in how he's waffling on that. The interview began with pandemic and vaccinations. That probably took a couple of minutes. I wonder how many of the 9 minutes were dedicated to that. And then as soon as the topic turned to, why are you a liar, he hung up. Although, why didn't you ask him that about let's see. Trump, whose administration oversaw the development of the COVID-19 vaccines, recommended that people get vaccinated, but said he's firmly against mandating that they do so. The mandate is really hurting our country. It's actually doing the opposite. Trump claimed, adding, a lot of Americans aren't standing for it, and it's hurting our country. He continued, the vaccines, I recommend taking them, but I think that has to be an individual choice. I mean, it's got to be individual, but I recommend taking them. And once again, one of my favorite Trump habits, and a lot of people have this habit, and the college kids writing papers have this habit of saying the same thing over again, twice, slightly differently for additional verbiage. Right? And this has to be X number of pages or a number of words. Right. Vaccines, I recommend taking them, but I think it has to be an individual choice. I mean, it's got to be an individual, but I recommend taking them. I'm slurring everything here, but you see what all right. The opposition to mandates is popular with Republicans, and the Supreme Court is currently weighing the Biden administration's vaccine or test mandate for large employers. But his comments come during the record Omicron surge, as the unvaccinated are far more likely to be hospitalized or die from the disease, and as Republicans are far more likely to be unvaccinated, which is great, if you ask me. Epidemiologists and health experts warn that if more people don't get vaccinated and the virus continues to morph, it could prolong the pandemic and delay any sense of us getting back to normal. And, of course, it could morph into something that also kills vaccinated Democrats, and we don't want that. Okay, just thought I'd be partisan about it. Why not? I didn't turn it into a partisan issue. It already was one. When I found it, it was partisan when I found it, folks. The former president said he wants to see therapeutics used to treat the virus after someone is infected, produced and distributed more widely. As a matter of fact, the president stood on the White House lawn on October 8th, 2020, and promised not only that such therapeutics would be developed, but that they would be delivered for free by the military to every vulnerable American who needed this treatment. And it would be for free, and I've been tracking it ever since, and people from time to time point out, well, you know, there are lots of therapeutics available now, and I know someone who did get it for free, and all of this is now true, but the plain fact of it for me is the president stood on the lawn of the White House after getting those therapeutics and having those therapeutics save his life when he got COVID, and he stood on the White House lawn and said it was going to be essentially an all of government, a totality of government effort to get everybody who needed it this miracle cure. I call it a cure, and I'm going to use the military to develop, to distribute it, and they're going to bring it straight to you, like wherever you are, and give it to you in your house. He made all sorts of fantastical sounding promises about this thing, and the reality of it is that another 50 million people have gotten infected since then, and while there are some people getting the treatment and getting it for free, and I'm sure it's saving them, thousands upon thousands are dead anyway. What happened to, I found the miracle cure and I'm going to give it to everybody and everybody's going to get it? The military, we're so dedicated to giving it to you that the military will bring it to you. 642,485 Americans as of last night, according to the records at Worldometers. 642,485 Americans have died of COVID since he said he could save them all, that he knew the miracle cure and the military would be bringing it to him. Yes, you can line up for them, and they're occasionally available in Texas or Florida, and you can line up and you can get it. In some places, they'll even give it to you for free, but you could have avoided the whole thing by getting vaccinated. But okay, fine, you didn't, or you got a breakthrough. If you got a breakthrough Omicron, you're out of luck with the Regeneron, but there is the other version that may or may not be available for free. But my point is, you don't stand on the White House lawn and say you're going to have an all-of-government effort to bring things to a miracle cure to people for free and do it like right in advance of the elections. And all the vulnerable seniors who vote so heavily Republican are going to get it for free. And the good old military, remember them? They're going to bring it to you and And well over on our way to 750,000 more people dead since he could cure it in an instant as soon as he ordered the military to bring it to you. And nothing. I mean, there's probably no way to make that particular thing stick on him. And get in line behind the 800 million other things that should land him in prison. Or in another time, in another place, dragged out of the White House and lynched. That's a thing that happened historically in other countries in times past. Torches and pitchforks and so forth. We don't do it. We don't do it. We should go back to the olden days. I can run for president. Back in the old days, they'd show up at the Frankenstein castle with the torches and the pitchforks, and they'd say, we're going to kill you. We're going to pull you out of there and kill you. Now we're too soft. Now we're too soft. We treat people with things like, jury trials and appeals. All this nonsense. Back in the old days, they had stocks and pillories, and you would throw rotten tomatoes. I never liked tomatoes. Too acidic for me. I really didn't. To me, I prefer other fruits and vegetables. Maybe you and I. Yeah, he's a Florida guy, right? Old man down in Florida. I like cantaloupe, half a cantaloupe nicely sliced, and they just take out the seeds in the middle, and they put a little of that cottage cheese on there. Maybe a couple of nice strawberries for garnish. It's a beautiful thing. I like grapefruit. Beautiful. I'm an old person Florida diet. Okay. Anyway. He's a jerk and he hung up. That's the story. What else did I want to tell you? Okay, well, let's see. Yes, all right. So I told you about Kelly Cannon dying from her bout with COVID. I recommend that you take a look at Marcos's write-up about it. The thing that really struck me, like I said, was Kamala Harris saying Delta variant is no joke, and she says, you're the effing joke. And then, that's what killed you. If you scroll all the way down, like I said, there's a couple of, I guess, Facebook, maybe, messages at the end to give you some idea about where she was. And by the way, you should see all sorts of context that Marcos includes other Facebook posts to tell you what kind of person this was, in case you're feeling even a little bit guilty about, pointing at this particular death. The meme that she posted, the celebratory meme, acquitted on all counts, that she posted upon the release of word of the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. That's the kind of person you're talking about. And then she finally says, well, I finally got hit with the Rona. This is December 23rd, 2021, so Merry Christmas to you. I finally got hit with the Rona. I'm getting a monoclonal antibodies infusion right now, by the way. Isn't that interesting? It's a freaking bad cold. Not much else. I haven't lost my sense of taste or smell, so maybe she had Omicron, because I understand that doesn't do it to you, but maybe not. At any rate, how do you like that for tempting fate? It's a freaking bad cold. Not much else. And, of course, she goes with the monoclonal antibodies, which earlier in the piece, Marcos points out, she posts that she had not been vaccinated and she had avoided a vaccine mandate, I think, from her employer by seeking and winning a religious exemption. And apparently the basis of the religious exemption was, I'm not taking the vaccine because the vaccine was developed using fetal stem cells, right? In the in the production of the initial vaccine, or I don't know at what point they use it. But apparently they have there's some truth to that, and they did use that, but, we're like, that's science. Anyway, the real point here was, well, I'll take the monoclonal antibodies instead once I need them. And guess what? They used in the development process of the monoclonal antibodies, the same fetal stem cell research was conducted there too, but she took that one because she was sick, and I don't believe it, and it's a hoax, and it's a bad cold, but I'll take the monoclonal antibodies. Well, anyway, it didn't matter, because update number 1 says it's been 24 hours since my diagnosis and monoclonal infusion treatment. It made a dramatic difference. It's a miracle cure, I call it. I'm going to send it to everybody. I feel like I'm about 90% or better. My fever is back to normal. So, by the way, all this by way of warning to the rest of you, or someone you know may think they'll also have a miracle, right? And then they get the fever's back to normal, no loss of smell or taste. My coughing is, quote, productive. That is to say, not dry coughing. I guess that means it moves phlegm. They also prescribe pills for the coughing, which are definitely working. I've added a daily cocktail of Emergen C with a few drops of quinine. Remember quinine? It's the main ingredient in hydroxychloroquine. Quine. Get it? To also help me fight this, not a great idea, along with my usual daily doses of vitamins and supplements. Everything seems to be going well. Early treatment is key. It sucks to be in isolation. Can't see my family frowny face emoji with a little tear, right? I was supposed to drive down and hang with my sister and her family, but had to cancel the trip because of this crap. Well, you'll hang eventually, don't worry. But we're doing a virtual present exchange today at 4 p.m. And then my dear friend, and that's, redacted, is bringing me dinner at 6 p.m. All things considered, I feel very blessed. Merry Christmas, everyone. Well, it goes on to explain, well, first of all, about the experimental monoclonal antibody cocktail from Regeneron having been tested on stem cells, right? Then in December 26th update, day 4, gee whiz, huh? This Rona is giving me a good run for the money, but I'll defeat it. Admittedly, it is one nasty virus. It was just a cold before. All stats are still good. Oximeter says 98. Temp fluctuates between 99.3 and 100. Never gets higher. Remember, the fever was gone before. I'm cured. 90%. Because of the low-grade fever, I have aches all over, and I'm very tired and weak all the time. This is very frustrating. That's what we told you. That's what we told you you would get when you catch it. Thanks to all my amazing friends who've left care packages on my porch. Love you all. And in an edit, I just found DoorDash. It's a game changer. Well, welcome to civilization. COVID Day 6 gets posted later on. Let's see if Day 4 is December 26th, and we're talking about the 28th now. I ain't gonna lie. Oh, this would be a good time to stop lying, yes. I ain't gonna lie. The past few days have been rough. My fever fluctuated, which he misspells, between 99.8 and 102.1. My oxygen count dipped below 95 once, and that terrified me. But last night, my fever broke. She's going to pretend again. And I woke up with soaked clothes. Sounds so great. What a great experience it's been for you. I checked my temp, and it's finally steady at 98.6. Oxygen is at 99 again. I'm still weak as a kitten, but this too shall pass. It won't. They say that COVID systems come in waves, spanning at least 10 to 12 days. I'm still coughing, which really hurts. When I cough, my rib cage feels like it's taken a pounding, much like a giant sore muscle. Just a cold. I don't get that, by the way, when I have colds. Do you? I have a question for all of you survivors of this plague, no longer a hoax. Did your fever return once it broke? Because mine did. Or have I indeed turned a corner in just 6 days with my awesome treatment and my quinine and whatnot? Well, somebody else, of course, then asks her, wish you were vaccinated? Hell no, she says. So I knew it was survivable, which it turns out not to be. But, survivable. By the way, is that the way you usually describe colds? It's just a cold. Some people live through them. It's survivable. Anyway, I also knew that the law of averages would eventually catch up with me in contracting this virus. Fear does not rule over me. Blah, blah, blah. Well, let's see. I guess the last... No, not second. Second to last update. Next update here. Well, by now you've heard from several friends and family that I'm in hospital fighting COVID pneumonia. This virus is certainly a stubborn thing. I wish I knew how long they're going to keep me here. Not I wish I knew I was wrong the whole time and should have gotten vaccinated. But I wish I knew how long they were going to keep me here. I would say for the rest of your life, by the way, is the answer to that. But apparently that's up to my body. I'm exhausted and it hurts to breathe, as it often does with freaking colds. I have a cold today. It hurts to breathe. Hurts to breathe is not where you want to be with anything. Anyway, thank you so much for the prayers. They're very much appreciated and needed. Keep them coming. And let's see. The next update on January 2nd comes from somebody else. She's not doing good. She's on 8 liters of O2. To give you perspective, my dad on his deathbed from COPD was at a 5. I don't really know what the scale is like, but she's at an 8. Anyway, I was in on the call when the doctor came in and he wanted to put her on remdesivir. We told them no. She's on a steroid IV and antibodies. Her blood O2 level is 90. This afternoon they gave her a stronger oxygen breathing system. It's burning her nostrils and eyes. Please continue to pray, etc., etc. Goes on from there, but it hurts to breathe. Oxygen is burning my nostrils and eyes. Yeah, you didn't know what you were doing. And then, of course, the next update. It is with deep sadness that we report that our dear sister, and that's redacted here, but we now know it's Kelly, fought a good fight, not really, and is now resting in the arms of her Savior. So right from there on, it's your standard operating procedure, and it was all terrific, and it was all worth it because she's gone to Jesus. And I think at some point somebody says, here's another person's update. My dear friend so-and-so went home to her heavenly mansion this afternoon. That's a new one on me. I'm not on the evangelical speak on that one, but I don't know. I mean, I always thought, what do I know? I'm not on the inside. I'm not an evangelical Christian. I'm not a Christian of any kind. So what do I know? But I thought that there was always like, well, it's like a dream come true and everything, but I don't know that there was ever any mention of mansions and worldly luxuries in heaven. So you feel fantastic, just not anything happen. There's no worldly anything because it's otherworldly. Well, yes, but for prosperity gospel people, okay, you like the idea of heaven, but it's not good enough sounding to you. What's your heavenly reward? Mansions, Lamborghinis. Why not? Sure, anything you want. That's the fantasy. I got no idea where that came from. Maybe it's just loose talk and throwaway term. You tell me. We'll be right back.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
Hi, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I just wanted to say it a different way, and not too many ways you can say it. We are on that Roots Radio. That's all there is to it. But it's an exciting thing. So I thought I'd shake it up a little bit. Anyway, time to, I guess, get off of beating up on this poor lady who just died in a situation of her own making. But it's happening every day, and I don't really know why it isn't convincing more idiots that they maybe were wrong. Anonymous idiots still have the opportunity to change their minds and run away. But I don't know. It's interesting, the things that Republicans will change their minds on and run away from. But, I mean, I guess the procedural posture is different, right? I have a vested interest. Getting what I want out of the COVID situation means protesting loudly, refusing to take the vaccine, and insisting that I'll be okay, and whatever. And I'll risk my career, my life, everything for sticking by this principle. Whereas, on the other hand, for instance, unrelated, but, I don't know. I guess, to me, I see a pattern. Ron Johnson, who you might remember is also an actual senator, despite the fact that he looks like and sounds like a late-night comedian parody of a senator. Senator from Wisconsin, running for re-election, he announces. And that is odd, not because he's a senator running for re-election, but because he campaigned initially on and won and said he was serious about it the whole time. Term limits. And that he was one of those people that said senators should serve, only 2 terms? Was he a 12-year guy? I don't know. Whatever. The point is he campaigned, send me to the Senate instead of these experienced people who know what they're doing. They've been there too long. We should be having term limits. I'll never overstay my welcome. I'll serve 12 years or whatever it is and then go. And, of course, he's now done that. And if he were to honor his pledge, even though he didn't pass any term limits legislation, he would impose the 12-year limit on himself. We've seen this before. There's a dime a dozen Republicans, and I guess a few Democrats somewhere along the line, too, who, hopped on the term limits bandwagon And then when their term limit came around, said, I'm not done. I have to save America. And Ron Johnson's the latest one of them. And to me, pardon me, maybe that's just fundamental difference between the way they work and we work, or maybe it's just me, but I would be too embarrassed. Not only too embarrassed to say, well, I was wrong about this fundamental issue that was the centerpiece of my campaign when I started, but also embarrassed to say not only that, but I'm just too essential to America to retire at this stage. There's a lot to do, and only I can save America. That too would be too embarrassing for me to say with a straight face. But maybe he didn't have a straight face at the time. Anyway, so he's doing that thing. So he's changed his mind, but it's because he's, headed clearly towards his own self-interest, and that's the motivating principle here. Not rigidity or flexibility or any variant of those two poles. I'm always heading towards what's in my own self-interest as I view it, even when that means death. I don't know how you get to where Kelly Cannon got to, where death from COVID is in my self-interest. That seems like not. I mean, death, I think definitionally, just definitely not in your self-interest to go toward death. Now, it could be in other people's interest, or it could be a selfless act or something like that, but here, no. Here, it's, my politics over everything, including my life, and in Ron Johnson's case, my politics over everything, including my honor. So that's the unifying thread there. Now we understand what their true north is. Me. Well, if it was me, it would be great. But them, that's the problem. Okay. Anyway, for me, it's fine. I'm a gimme-tarian along with everybody else. I'm going to stop pretending anymore. I want all the benefits. I want to be rich and everybody to listen to me. Wouldn't that be great? And I want a mansion in heaven. I'll throw that in there too. And you know what? Because I'm an egalitarian, mansions for everybody in heaven. You want a mansion? You got it. You want 10 mansions? It's okay by me. No skin off my nose. It's heaven. It doesn't matter to me if you have more than I do. Quote unquote more. Because I'm enjoying mine more. Because it's heaven. And I can do whatever I want, apparently. This is whatever. I didn't want to get theological about this, but that's not really theological either. That's just BS. Here's where I think we need to run to. Newsweek. Show me your stupid article, Newsweek. The one I mentioned earlier about Mark Meadows knowing about these forgeries, about these certificates. I should be into this. I don't know why I'm resisting. Mark Meadows worked on creating fake electoral college to overturn election results, according to this report, written by, not the report, but this report about the report, written by Isabel Van Bruggen, which is a total real person who definitely works at Newsweek still. Apparently a lot of people do. So there's still money there to pay people to say they work for Newsweek. And, why not? Used to be prestigious. Take the money. I don't care. Take the mansion for all I care. Mark Meadows, former chief of staff to Donald Trump, who, by the way, also welcome to a mansion, whether, wherever in the afterlife his mansion is. You know what? Honestly, put him in a mansion in hell. I don't care. As we were in a mansion, it's Pervalago. It's fantastic, but there's no Diet Coke, and all the women are 80 years or older, and there's no teenagers for you to chase around the desk. That's the Donald Trump version of hell. Also no golf, I guess. Mark Meadows, former chief of staff to Donald Trump, who should be in hell, allegedly worked on creating a fake electoral college. Couldn't we read the news for real on TV this way? A fake electoral college following this, allegedly worked on creating, I would say, fake electoral college certificates of ascertainment, if you want to know the full word for it. But they just stop here at creating a fake electoral college, which is a much more daunting prospect, but much more interesting sounding, following the 2020 presidential election. That's according to a contempt report released Sunday night by the House of Representatives panel investigating the January 6th Capitol riot. The report comes just days after Meadows launched legal proceedings against the panel and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Meadows filed a lawsuit in a Washington, D.C. federal court on December 8th, after the committee said it would proceed with a contempt case against him for his refusal to appear for a deposition. Among other issues, the committee said Meadows sent emails and texts about sending alternate electors, quote unquote, to Congress in November of 2020, allegedly saying, "I love it," about the idea to an unidentified member of Congress. That is very interesting. And I guess whenever someone around the Trump circle says, "I love it," it's them saying, "I love crime," just like we heard about Junior. Remember, if it's what you say, I love it, especially later this summer, the whole Trump Tower meeting with the Russians, right? Mr. Meadows received text messages and emails regarding apparent efforts to encourage Republican legislators in certain states to send alternate slates of electors to Congress, a plan which one member of Congress acknowledged was, quote, highly controversial, i.e. illegal and you belong in jail for it, and to which Mr. Meadows responded, "I love it," the committee report said. Mr. Meadows responded to a similar message by saying, "We are," and another such message by saying, "Yes, have a team on it," it said. I guess people saying, "Hey, are we doing this?" "Yes, we are. I have a team on it." The committee also said in its report that Meadows introduced former President Donald Trump to then Department of Justice official Jeffrey Clark. Oh, okay. So he's responsible for the meeting as part of efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Mr. Clark went on to recommend to Mr. Trump that he be installed as acting attorney general and that DOJ should send a letter to state officials urging them to take certain actions, Georgia, for instance, that could affect the outcome of the November 2020 election by, among other things, appointing alternate slates of electors to cast electoral votes for Mr. Trump rather than now President Biden, the report said. Wow, Jeffrey Clark's recommendation? Really? Well, okay, that is something. Meadows also sent a January 5th email recommending the National Guard be on standby and that the troops be, quote, present to protect pro-Trump people, according to the report. And that, too, stinks to high heavenly mansions and should be investigated. Mr. Meadows exchanged text messages with and provided guidance to an organizer of the January 6th rally on the Ellipse after the organizer told him that things have gotten crazy and I desperately need some direction. Please, the report said. The report comes with Meadows under fire for refusing to cooperate with the panel probing the events that unfolded on January 6th. Committee Chairman Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi said in a December 8th letter to Meadows' attorney, George Terwilliger, that the panel is left with no choice but to advance contempt proceedings and recommend that the body in which Mr. Meadows once served refer him for criminal prosecution. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon has been charged with contempt of Congress, as you know, while the committee has said it's weighing similar charges against Clark. That's where we stand with the Newsweek thing. Also of some interest, CBS News, I went to check on, I mentioned that there were a new round of subpoenas. I wanted to find out who they were for. Not terribly exciting, but we got to call the names out and figure out what's going on here. So CBS article came up first. I grabbed it. January 6th committee subpoenas Trump allies who helped plan the Stop the Steal rally, writes Zach Hudak for CBS News. The House Select Committee, let me see if I can shorten it a little bit. What did the committee do? It's directing its latest batch of subpoenas to Trump allies who allegedly helped plan the rally. The panel on Tuesday issued a subpoena to former White House advisor Ross Worthington. Like, that's like a joke rich person's name, but okay. Anyway, I don't know who that is, but maybe he becomes a household name at some point. And this is a collector's item of a podcast. Ross Worthington, whom the committee believes to have helped draft former President Donald Trump's speech at the Ellipse, which included such hits as what's quoted here. Let's see if we can figure out why it's quoted. "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You'll have to show strength and you have to be strong," Trump said at the Ellipse before thousands of supporters broke into the Capitol. "We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore," which isn't a typical speech writer line, but I guess maybe that's part of the question. Did you write this or did he ad-lib it? Maybe that's of interest to them. The speech had been key to the House impeachment of Trump for incitement for an insurrection. Many of the protesters in advance began walking toward the Capitol after he delivered it. Protests on that day escalated, of course, to an attack on our democracy. It's Benny Thompson, and I want to give him his due, but you know what he's going to say here. The panel on Tuesday also issued subpoenas to Andy Surabian and Arthur Schwartz, both of whom served as advisors to Donald Trump Jr., who isn't even a person who should have advisors, because I understand that he doesn't have a job. but okay. In letters to them, committee chairman, I guess, Thompson said, I think they really meant Chairman Thompson, said the committee has reason to believe that you communicated with both organizers and speakers at the rally held on the Ellipse, which is because it was a campaign rally and not an official act of the president, which goes to what Joan was telling us yesterday about the, I think, dumb arguments being made by Trump's lawyers in federal court yesterday, and I'm hopeful that the judge sees through it, and it sounds like he got a fair shot at seeing all the way through it. Anyway, Sarabian's lawyer tweeted a statement saying, while we plan on cooperating with the committee within reason, we are bewildered as to why Mr. Sarabian is being subpoenaed in the first place. He had nothing at all to do with the events that took place at the Capitol that day, zero involvement in organizing the rally that preceded it, and was off the payroll of the Trump campaign as of November 15th, 2020. So then what's the problem? Go ahead and answer the questions. And I think he's saying he will show up. The panel set late January and early February deadlines for the trio of Trump allies to hand over documents and sit or appear virtually for depositions. The committee has spoken with over 340 individuals in its investigation, including historians, Thompson said. Anything else? This is background about why there is a committee in the first place, and I believe you know all about that. So that's what's the latest round of subpoenas, or included in the latest round of subpoenas, and some new names, and I'm glad we're up to date on that. Let's see. We can save that for another day, but interesting, I guess, behind-the-scenes stuff about procedure for the setup of the filibuster rules change fight, if we ever get to it, although it's now beginning to sound like that might take place. They might actually do that on Monday the 17th. I thought that it would have to come before then because they weren't going to come back for the federal holiday, for one thing, or Monday ever. But I guess they are into the symbolism of the day and will, in fact, hold session on the 17th and have that vote on that. That's symbolically important, that that holiday, the Martin Luther King Day. So that's good. I mean, I guess I like the stagecraft of it. And there's a little bit of, well, we'll save it for another day when we have a little bit more time to discuss the procedure by which they would do this. Not the exciting part of how would they structure it, nuclear option or otherwise, but the legislative vehicle that they will use to bring the motion to the floor. So we'll skip that for today and come to it another day. Let's see. The New York Times reported the other day, and perhaps we should spend a little time on it just to keep up to date on this. Was it yesterday? Day before, the 10th, that they printed this piece. Pence and the January 6th committee engage in high-stakes dance over testimony. I didn't even realize he was already on Dancing with the Stars. Seems like a quick movement. Getting the former vice president to answer questions under oath could be crucial as the House panel focuses on Donald Trump's responsibility for the Capitol riot. I'm sure this is about being caught between the rock and hard place of, well, they were trying to murder me, and I feel like I should contribute to the investigation about that. But also, I want them all to vote for me, and I think I can still get them to do that, or I will never be able to get them to vote for me for president if I participate in this investigation. Yeah, well, forget about it. They're never going to vote for you. They were going to kill you. And even your own brother wouldn't help you. So come on. Well, anyway, let's see what they've got here. Or take a sampling of it, because it's long-form stuff. Because it's Michael Schmidt and Alan Feuer doing it for the New York Times on a big banner headline piece. So it's going to take a while. As the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th assault on the Capitol rushes to gather evidence and conduct interviews, how far it will be able to go in holding former President Donald J. Trump accountable increasingly appears to hinge on one possible witness, former Vice President Mike Pence. Since the committee was formed last summer, Mr. Pence's lawyer and the panel have been talking informally about whether he would be willing to speak to investigators. But as Pence began sorting through a complex calculation about his cooperation, he indicated to the committee that he was undecided. To some degree, the current situation reflects negotiating strategies by both sides, with the committee eager to suggest an air of inevitability about Pence answering its questions, and the former vice president's advisors looking for reasons to limit his political exposure from a move that would further complicate his ambitions to run for president in 2024. But there also appears to be growing tension Actually, I think we may have summed up the whole thing quite adequately by saying, yeah, it's the rock and a hard place thing. I don't know that there's anything else to this very long article, but maybe we'll find out later on. Let's see. How did we get down to this? Oh, well, they're talking about the various other people, the rioters who have been convicted thus far, and their statements about why we were there, and we were there to put pressure on Mike Pence. There is, for instance, the testimony of Gina Bisignano, the Beverly Hills beautician, I think we tried to pronounce her name the other day, who helped her fellow Trump supporters smash a window at the Capitol, noting in court papers connected to her plea that she had marched on the building specifically after hearing Trump encourage Pence, quote, to do the right thing. While in the crowd, papers say Ms. Bisignano filmed herself saying, "We were marching on the Capitol to put some pressure on Mike Pence." The papers also note that once Ms. Bisignano reached the building, she started telling others what Pence has done and encouraged people carrying tools like hatchets to break the window. Similarly, Matthew Green, a member of the Central New York chapter of the Proud Boys, said in court papers connected to his own guilty plea that he had conspired with other members of the far-right group to, quote, send a message to legislators and Vice President Pence, who were inside the Capitol, certifying the final stage of the election. So, I guess that's where that article is going. I don't know. At this point, I think we may have gotten all the information out of it, and the rest of it is, I don't know what, gilding the lily at this point. Although now I'm thinking, well, what was it that I definitely wanted to try and squeeze in here? Oh, yeah, well, that one I think I might need some more time on. But, okay, so planning the rest of the week's shows. Let's see. I do feel like, though, that was maybe not the greatest use of our time to continue with that. Let me bring this to your attention, though I don't think we'll get through the reading of this one. I also have, you know what? Maybe we'll do this instead. For this one and this one for tomorrow, note to self. Let me jump back into the Skype notes where Greg had sent me Marcy's latest stuff. Yes. Okay. Right. Did we read this one or not? I don't know. This came out, I think, yesterday. I'll read through it. The Green Bay sweep. Remember that being the code for the Bannon plan is inextricably tied to the violent mob. And I guess this is another dot connecting exercise from Empty Wheel here. I just wanted to bring that to your attention because that's the one that Greg sent me when he was talking about the dots that she was connecting and what might be the connection between the fake certificates and the larger conspiracy. But I don't recall it actually being discussed directly in this piece, although maybe it's in an update at some point. Anyway, I bring this piece to your attention because it was of some interest to me that she had come to this point and saying, well, the Green Bay sweep is inextricably tied to the violent mob. I had said, a little bit earlier in, I don't know, the middle of last week, maybe even earlier than that. But, I mean, I don't see how you could come to any other conclusion. So in that sense, I agree that the Green Bay sweep thing, that's the code name that not only did Bannon put on it, but also that Peter Navarro, for whatever reason, associating himself with that, which I think is probably a huge legal mistake. But he was saying this was their perfect plan. And remember, he was offering this whole thing up as some sort of exculpatory material, that they had a plan for stealing the election and it was ruined by the riot. And so therefore, there's no way you could hold us responsible for the riot since it was detrimental to our interests. It really was not. And the Green Bay sweep, whatever you may say about it, brilliant, stupid, legal, illegal, doesn't matter. What my conclusion was, if you're saying, and you seem to be saying, that this plan as expressed in this document would be sufficient to legally overturn the election without the mob, and that we're better off not having the mob there, you got a problem, because as I read it, this plan doesn't succeed, and the certification of the Electoral College votes from the various states. The stated goal here from Navarro is that those get sent back to the states by Mike Pence's unilateral action. They get sent back to the states and revised or substituted with different slates of electors. And the legislatures want to change their minds about what gets sent. The problem is that it doesn't get past the objection from the floor of the joint session that, no, we're not going to do that. Yes, Mike Pence says that's what we're going to do, but I object, and I think the chair is wrong, and I appeal the ruling of the chair. And yeah, you can push your way past that, but that's what the mob is there for. Either to say, to hell with democratic procedure, and to actually grab the electoral certificates physically and take them so that they get back to the states, which also doesn't work because there's repositories elsewhere. We've explained that before. Or to intimidate people into saying, that's okay. Actually, we don't appeal the ruling of the chair because we're afraid we'll get murdered if we do. But as I've explained, Mike Pence purports to rule that the certificates get sent back, and somebody says, no, they don't. That's not even contemplated in the Electoral Count Act. I know that's your ruling, but I appeal the ruling of the chair. At which point Pence can say, well, I don't recognize you for an appeal. I mean, which is just a coup. It's just a declaration that there's no role for Congress here in Congress. And I don't know what you think you're doing, but I'm not going to listen to your appeal. And they could do that. I mean, they could attempt to do that. And then it's a question of, can people rush up to the dais and beat up Mike Pence without having the the sergeant at arms arrest everybody? I don't know what happens. And then, all they're really after is, they say, 24, 48, whatever hours delay in the counting so that there's a window for the legislators to unilaterally send ahead alternative slates, even if the papers don't get returned from Congress. But then you've just spilled over into outright coup, and it's all dependent on the use of violence in order to make it happen. So there never was any plan for a peaceful, but, and you could dispute the legality of it. People are in the middle of doing that. I mean, I think we can make proof that what you're doing is still illegal, but the whole thing depended on the mob. And, well, I guess Marcy now agrees that the Green Bay sweep is inextricably tied to the violent mob, but perhaps for other reasons. Anyway, I just thought that was of some interest and worth sharing. In the meantime, I'll throw this in to end things just for the day to make it more thematic. TPM reporting yesterday, Josh Kovensky writing for them, Steve Bannon gloats, in all capitals, gloats after Ezra Klein praises his strategies. The former Trump strategist exulted over a mention by the liberal columnist, and I guess they could say even the liberal Ezra Klein agrees with me. Well, he doesn't agree with what you're doing. He's simply saying there's a certain logic to what you're doing, not the Green Bay sweep part. But in other words, the Bannon plan, such as it is, to encourage Republicans everywhere to flood into local town meetings and school board meetings and not only disrupt things, but to stand for election and run campaigns to get themselves on local elections boards and local Republican committees, et cetera, for determining who's going to be the candidates for various offices in those areas. School board, run for something. And I don't know. So he seems to think he's struck on this genius point, and to a certain extent, I guess Ezra Klein is, I don't know whether he really would acknowledge, oh yeah, well, there's a unique genius to this. But all he's saying is, well, you're right. If you want to hold political office, a great strategy for doing that is running for political office. I mean, that's all that's been discovered here, is that Steve Bannon says, well, political office is where power resides by design. Now, of course, it's a design that he says he wants to destroy, but for the purposes of selling gold and survival kits, he's going to now remind everybody that, okay, power resides in political office, elective political office in this country. And so if you would like to exercise that power, you should run for political office. Now, I guess the additional part of his strategy is, and by the way, one of the risks of running for political office is you won't necessarily win. Other people could vote for the other person. They prefer them to you, especially if you're a dangerous idiot like he is. So one of the best things you can do to improve your chances of winning is threaten to murder the other candidate and anyone who votes for that other candidate. That usually helps. You should try doing that. And, well, that's a problem. And it's a problem for people who want to believe, for instance, that democracy prevailed on January 6th. But it wasn't January 6th that turned Steve Bannon into an evil, violent fascist, and so that he would encourage people to sweep away the administrative state, rebuild America from the ground up with maybe a different system, and in the meantime, murder your political enemies. He was doing that all the time. Anyway, I don't know. I just found the whole thing weird. I am sure that Ezra Klein wasn't saying what a great idea this is or what a great person he is. Certainly not that. Or even that it was a particularly innovative thing. It was just him saying, well, yeah, he's right. If you want to hold political power, you got to run for political office. But, whatever. That sent the tickle up Steve Bannon's legs, and he figured he could troll everybody, and I guess TPM sort of kind of takes the bait here, although they explain it correctly. Bannon is gloating after Ezra Klein praises. I wouldn't say he praised his strategy. He just said, yeah, if you want to get from point A to point B and you start walking from point A towards point B, that would be a pretty good plan for arriving at point B. Okay. Steve Bannon, political genius. He came up with this great idea. Well, should have asked me first. I would have given you a better one. Anyway, if you don't like what I gave you for the day, Justice Putnam has a much better serving of news and happenings from around the country and around the world on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, what am I looking at here? I'm looking at a late report on what's coming up in the show. I know, Justice, he'll be kicking himself afterwards for not having pressed the return key on this, but I can assure you that it is well worth your time because there are so many things happening that we didn't even touch on that Justice will take up next.